I did not build a boiler factory to impress the world. I built it so that no mother in Burkina Faso would ever have to cook over smoke and tears again.
In a world where billion-dollar tech giants chase moonshots and headlines, one African soldier quietly lit a fire beneath his people's feet, literally. While the world mocked him, questioned him, and some even called him naive, President Ibrahim Traore saw power not in weapons, but in boilers. Simple, strong, steam-powered tools that cook food, save fuel, and carry pride. Just 5 years ago, Burkina Faso was the kind of country most Western news outlets only mentioned in the same breath as famine or conflict. But today, under Traoré's bold leadership, it is rewriting the narrative one rivet, one seal, one kitchen at a time. This isn't just about cookware. It's about reclaiming dignity through design, about factories humming with new life in dusty towns, about young men and women finding purpose not in migration, but in craftsmanship, and about a humble device, the Rasco Baba boiler, now used not only in African kitchens, but also in European hotels and Gulf restaurants. If you've never heard of this story, you're not alone. That's exactly why we're telling it. Subscribe if you believe that the truth is more important than the headlines. Share this video if you think leadership should be measured by how many lives it uplifts, not how many likes it gets. Now let's journey into the steam-powered story of Burkina Faso's unlikely industrial revolution. When Ibrahim Traore assumed leadership of Burkina Faso, he didn't inherit a nation, he inherited a wound. The treasury was dry schools in ruins, youth unemployed, and trust had been exiled for decades. The international press didn't even pretend to hide their skepticism. Another coup in Africa, they said. More chaos. But Traoré, a former soldier raised in the dust of hardship, had no intention of playing the same old game. Instead of announcing grand military offensives or political purges, he walked into a forgotten warehouse in the industrial outskirts of Ouagadougou and said 8 words that would change everything. We will build our future with our hands. That warehouse would become Rasco Baba, not just a factory, but a symbol. At first, many didn't understand. Why a boiler factory, journalists scoffed. What does a soldier know about cookware? They failed to see what Traoré saw. Burkina Faso didn't need foreign aid. It needed functional dignity. You see, in this corner of West Africa, millions of households still cook over open flames, inhaling smoke daily. Mothers, grandmothers, children. It wasn't just inefficient. It was dangerous, time-consuming, and degrading. Traoré believed that a kitchen appliance, of all things, could be the beginning of an industrial renaissance. Start where the people sweat, he once said, and you'll know where to cool the fire. The first few months were slow. Skeletal frames of machinery arrived in silence, imported not from Paris or New York, but from regional partners like Ghana and Mali. Local engineers, many of whom had once dreamed of working in Europe, returned to help build the assembly lines. Welders trained farmers to shape metal. Former taxi drivers became safety inspectors. Women with no prior factory experience were hired, trained, and promoted. By the 3rd month, the first prototype of the Rasco Baba steam boiler emerged, crafted from domestic iron, polished by Burkinabe hands, and pressure-tested in the heat of hope. And it worked, not just in kitchens, but in the hearts of a weary people. The Rasco Baba boiler wasn't a gimmick. It was a genuine leap in affordable kitchen technology, designed for home cooks and professional chefs alike. Each boiler was fitted with precision heat control, allowing faster cooking with lower fuel consumption, advanced steam seal engineering, preventing energy waste, food-safe non-stick linings made without harmful chemicals, ergonomic handles, heat-resistant and durable, even under extended pressure. This wasn't some knockoff copy of European cookware. It was designed specifically for African kitchens, where cooking often means preparing for 10, not 2. It was made to handle tough stews, dense grains, and long-cooked meats, all while preserving flavor nutrients and time. What's more, every component down to the final rivet was locally sourced, giving rise to an entire ecosystem of supply chains, metal forges, paint shops, transport logistics packaging units, and local advertising cooperatives. It's not just a boiler, said one technician. It's the first machine we've made that the world wants from us. By year's end, orders poured in not just from towns across Burkina Faso, but from Niger, Ghana, and Benin. Soon the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and even parts of Eastern Europe began requesting custom exports. The boiler, once a local necessity, was becoming a global brand, but perhaps more importantly, it bore the stamp made in Burkina Faso. For a nation long dismissed as a place of poverty, this small badge meant more than branding. It meant legitimacy. Hotels in Dubai began using them in staff kitchens. A restaurant in Vilnius, Lithuania, featured it in their chef's Instagram post, praising its energy efficiency. A military base in Oman switched to Rasco Baba models after witnessing their reliability during testing. The world began to ask, what else can this country build? Before Rasco Baba, many young people in Burkina Faso had two options: stay and suffer, or leave and hope. Migration was rampant. There is nothing for us here, they used to say. Now things have changed. I used to dream of driving trucks in Europe, said Soliman, a 22-year-old who now leads the welding unit. Today, I wake up to build something that feeds families across continents. For many elders, it's even more emotional. After decades of exploitation, failed NGOs, and broken promises, Rasco Baba is the first thing they've seen, built by the people, for the people. The transformation wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Traoré never promised heaven. He promised work. He delivered structure. And in doing so, he lit a fire that would soon boil beyond the borders. From a country once known only for instability and struggle came a quiet force of craft, competence, and courage. This is the story of how Burkina Faso, under the steady hand of Ibrahim Traore, turned a humble cooking vessel into a vessel of hope and the beginning of a greater dream. We thought it was just a boiler. We were wrong. It was a banner. It didn't happen all at once. Like all revolutions, the world only noticed once it was too big to ignore. 1 month a small feature in an African tech journal, then a short segment on Africa News. But the real turning point came when a renowned chef in Qatar declared live on television, "These boilers from Burkina Faso outperform anything we import from Europe. I use them daily. My staff fights over them." Suddenly, the orders doubled. 3 months later, a Swedish documentary crew arrived in Bobo Dioulasso. What they found wasn't just a factory. It was a movement. Rows of young men and women in uniform working in silence and rhythm. Their focus was laser sharp. Not rushed, not desperate, but proud. "I never thought my hands would touch something used in Paris," said Aicha, one of the factory's senior inspectors. "But every time I see our stamp, I feel like we've already won." At first, foreign cookware companies laughed. "Let them have their moment," a French executive was overheard saying. "It won't last." But it did. And then came the backlash. Just 6 months into full production, Rasco Baba received notices from 2 European brands alleging patent infringement, despite the designs being entirely original. Customs at certain African ports suddenly began delaying Rasco Baba shipments. Diplomats in West Africa subtly hinted at safety compliance reviews. But the factory didn't stop. They doubled output. President Ibrahim Traore held a press briefing calm and defiant. If our machines were not a threat, they wouldn't try to stop them. Within Burkina Faso, something even more powerful was brewing emotional allegiance. For the first time in decades, ordinary citizens began defending a national product with fierce loyalty. Social media in the country was flooded with images of families standing beside their boilers, holding signs that read, "This is our pride. This is our power. University students hosted workshops explaining the engineering behind the Rasco Baba design. Farmers formed cooperatives to donate food to factory workers. Local musicians began composing songs about the steam that feeds us. And perhaps most movingly, children in rural schools drew pictures of the boiler on classroom walls, not as a machine, but as a hero. By now, journalists from around the globe were paying attention. A BBC correspondent visited the Ouagadougou production line, expecting just another African PR stunt. Instead, he wrote, "In a city where I once reported only on coups and hunger, I now watched workers ship 500 units of advanced kitchen equipment to Stockholm. It was humbling." In the U.S. niche, economic blogs began publishing underreported stories about Burkina Faso's self-reliance model. A few African-American podcasters even compared Traoré's approach to FDR-era public work mobilization, calling it radical but deeply practical. As success grew, so did pressure. Some advisors suggested licensing deals. Offers came in from German kitchen brands, a Saudi logistics group, even a tech investor in San Francisco. But Ibrahim Traore stood firm. "Burkina Faso doesn't need permission to succeed," he said in a national address. "This is not just commerce, it's sovereignty in stainless steel." And in a bold move, he ordered that no foreign ownership of the Rasco Baba design would be permitted. Instead, he launched a national boiler innovation fund, open only to African engineers and developers. Within weeks, dozens of young designers had submitted improvements, some integrating solar-powered models, others optimizing for communal kitchens and schools. By year 2, the tone of the world had shifted. Rasco Baba was no longer a curiosity. It was a blueprint. Delegations from Tanzania, Zambia, and Gabon arrived for factory tours not as clients, but as learners. Traoré announced plans to build sister factories across allied nations under the Alliance of Sahel States framework. This wasn't just about manufacturing, it was industrial diplomacy, and it was working. One of the most powerful moments came not in a boardroom, but in a village 40 miles outside the capital. There, in a modest clay house, an 83-year-old grandmother named Mama Diarra was interviewed by a local news crew. She pointed to her Rasco Baba boiler and said softly, "I've buried 6 children, all before they turned 30. Poverty took them. Smoke took them. Now I boil millet in peace. My youngest granddaughter is going to university next year. Tell the president, I pray for him every morning." It wasn't just machinery being built in Burkina Faso, it was legacy. And so the world watched, some with admiration, some with envy, as a nation known for conflict quietly built an empire of pressure. Cookers powered not by foreign loans or charity, but by the will of its people. The steam from a Rasco Baba boiler now rises from Ouagadougou to Riyadh, from Niger to Naples, and with it rises a story, a warning, a promise, and a proof that when a leader believes and a nation builds, anything is possible. The steam changed more than the kitchen. It changed the country. At first glance, the Rasco Baba boiler might seem like just a household appliance. But inside Burkina Faso, it had become something far greater, a turning point. The moment a Burkinabe mother could boil rice without coughing from smoke, or a young chef could prepare meals with tools made by his own neighbors, it sent a ripple across the nation. This wasn't just about metal and fire. It was about agency. In a country where unemployment among youth once topped every national concern, Ibrahim Traore didn't create slogans, he created jobs. Across Rasco Baba's production sites, over 4,000 young people found direct employment. But that was only the beginning. Thousands more joined the ecosystem, local transporters, hauling raw materials and finished goods, technicians setting up small repair hubs in villages, women-led cooperatives specializing in boiler packaging and branding street vendors, who now sell with pride, home-cooked Rasco Baba style. And perhaps most beautiful of all schools began adapting vocational training based on Rasco Baba's success. Welding, safety, engineering, metallurgy, no longer theoretical. These were paths to real paychecks. A shift happened, quietly, steadily. The youth of Burkina Faso were no longer dreaming of leaving. They were staying and building. One of the lesser discussed but most powerful effects of the project was what it did to the family. In many homes, especially rural ones, the mother often spent 5 to 6 hours a day collecting firewood, starting fires, cooking slowly, and dealing with illness from inhaled smoke. Now, with a Rasco Baba unit, that time dropped to less than 2 hours. Children were healthier. Elders lived longer. Mealtimes became gathering moments, not survival rituals. "Before my mother's hands were black from soot," said a teenage boy in Tenkodogo. "Now she smiles when she cooks." I think, we talk more because of this. In an age of technological rush, Traoré did something radically human. He made time. It wasn't just women who were empowered. In a culture where economic failure often emasculated young men, the pride of being useful, again, changed lives. "I make boilers," said a man named Cutter, pointing to his ID badge. "I don't carry guns. I don't beg. I build." Rasco Baba became a rite of passage for many. Some joined just to earn, but they stayed to lead. Internal promotions were common. Several young welders became team supervisors. Women took on quality control roles, and many graduates went on to launch their own repair workshops in nearby towns. This was not charity. It was empowerment. As the boiler project grew, so did pressure on local politicians, but in a way, no one expected. Residents began demanding more industrial initiatives, not loans, not gifts, systems. Leaders who had spent decades offering empty speeches now faced villagers asking, "Where is our small factory? Why hasn't our town joined the distribution network? Can we get welding classes here?" This shift in civic pressure brought a silent, potent political change. The social contract evolved. For once, citizens were asking their leaders not just to fix the roads, but to ignite opportunity. Globally, Africa News picked up the story with a headline few thought they'd ever publish: Burkina Faso sets industrial model for the Sahel. Other African nations took notice. Mali, Niger, and Guinea sent delegations to understand the Rasco Baba supply model. Plans emerged to license boiler manufacturing in partnership with local governments, still under Traoré's insistence that no foreign equity shall own our blueprints. What was once a national initiative was now becoming a continental framework. Meanwhile, foreign media tiptoed toward coverage no longer with condescension, but curiosity. "Is Burkina Faso quietly leading a civil tech revolution in West Africa?" asked a columnist in The Guardian. "Can kitchen-level innovation outperform aid dependency?" posed a U.S. policy podcast. The answers, while still unfolding, pointed to one clear message: you can no longer ignore this nation. To many outsiders, Ibrahim Traore had been a mystery. A soldier turned head of state, a young man with old values. But as Rasco Baba took off, so did his legend, not as a firebrand, but as a builder. He didn't give bombastic speeches. He gave clear instructions. He didn't chase photo ops. He stood in boiler lines inspecting lids. He wasn't praised for theory. He was loved for practical vision. And in a country where leaders once feared to walk among the poor, Traoré walked into workshops unannounced, often helping carry parts or taking lunch with staff. "He listens," said one worker. That's all we ever wanted from power. Rasco Baba was never just a product. It was a direction. A national GPS recalibrating where hope resides. Instead of slogans on posters, it gave paychecks with pride, kitchens with health roads with purpose, education with clarity, instead of begging for IMF debt relief. Burkina Faso now exports confidence, one steam unit at a time. From the soot of despair to the shine of stainless steel, this nation is boiling a new path. And as one local radio host said, we are not cooking meals anymore. We are cooking the future. From New York to Nairobi, from Chicago to Cotonou, one question began echoing in economic forums and family kitchens alike. How did Burkina Faso, once labeled a fragile state, build a product now found in European kitchens and Gulf hotels? To understand this moment, we must confront a discomforting truth: Africa has never lacked talent. It's lacked trust. And now that Ibrahim Traore is rebuilding that trust from within the world, isn't sure how to respond. In Washington, think tanks and European policy circles, Rasco Baba is now cited in quiet conversations, described not just as a success, but as a pattern breaker. The narrative they weren't prepared for was this: no foreign investment, no IMF dependency, no glossy Western consultants, just raw initiative backed by a population that finally believed in Burkina Faso's capacity. One U.S. trade analyst put it bluntly in a leaked briefing: they didn't ask us for help. That's what makes this harder to classify. In American political media, particularly among progressive circles, the story became a kind of litmus test. Some praised it, others ignored it. But Africa News kept reporting consistently, placing Ibrahim Traore among the top 5 most practical reformers of the decade. What struck many older Americans watching this story unfold wasn't just what Burkina Faso built, but how familiar it felt. In small towns across the U.S., places like Youngstown, Flint, or Gary factories once meant purpose, pride, and place. Now many sit hollow. And here was a young African president in 2025 building exactly what many Americans wish they could bring back: local manufacturing, vocational empowerment leadership that shows up and rolls up sleeves. One Vietnam veteran in Tennessee commented on a Facebook post about Rasco Baba: "We used to build steel that could change a city. This guy built a boiler that's changing a nation. God bless him." The story isn't about pity. It's about parallels. It's about what happens when leadership dares to start small. For decades, the Western model of helping Africa followed a pattern: diagnose poverty, offer aid, monitor, repeat. But Ibrahim Traore quietly skipped all that. He said, "We are not poor, we are underused." And in doing so, he flipped the script. Now, instead of asking for handouts, Burkina Faso is exporting tools, ideas, and dignity. And that makes global institutions nervous. Why? Because it shows it can be done differently. The World Bank might not fund your boilers, but if the world is buying them anyway, what does that say about the system? Perhaps the greatest potential in the Rasco Baba story isn't economic, it's relational. In a time when much of the West speaks of immigration borders and helping Africa from a distance, this project offers another option: co-creation. Imagine a joint U.S.-Burkina Faso vocational program. African-designed products in American stores, mutual mentorships between Detroit engineers and Ouagadougou welders. Why not, after all? When Ibrahim Traore refused to import steel and chose to forge it at home, he wasn't just building a boiler. He was building a conversation the world now has to engage in. What if Africa doesn't need saving? Just listening. So now, dear viewer, we turn to you, not just as an audience, but as a witness. What do you see in this story? A nation rising, a leader delivering a blueprint we once followed and forgot. If Burkina Faso can transform itself one steam unit at a time, what's stopping us from believing we can build again too? Sometimes it takes a distant land to remind us of what we already knew: that dignity isn't imported. It's welded one honest job at a time. That's the question we began with. A simple tool, a humble factory, a country few had heard of beyond the usual headlines. And yet, here we are. In the age of artificial intelligence and trillion-dollar apps, it was a steam-powered pot designed not in Silicon Valley, but in Burkina Faso, that reminded the world what real innovation looks like. Not sleek, not fast, but human. And behind it all stands a man named Ibrahim Traore. Not a perfect man, but a present one. One who walked into darkness not with promises, but with a plan. One who said, "If we fix the fire, we feed the future." Today, Africa News doesn't report on Burkina Faso the way it used to. The words have changed. So has the tone. And soon the world must follow. Because this isn't just about Africa. This is about us all, our families, our work, our pride. So we ask again, can a boiler change a nation? Look at the workers. Look at the exports. Look at the faces of those who no longer leave their homeland just to survive. You decide. Please share if you feel that you are one of the first to know about and support President Ibrahim Traore. Subscribe if you believe that the truth is more important than the headlines. And tell us in the comments. Do you think Traoré's strategy is the future of Africa, or should someone else lead next?